Welcome to the Strength Coach Experience podcast. I'm your host, Joe Lego, and here we go. All right, welcome to the Strength Coach Experience, episode 3. I want to welcome Brad Godbold, strength coach at NYU, 10 years in the field, Army veteran, and me and Brad used to work together at LIU down in the dungeon. Brad, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to get this done.
Joe, thank you for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Of course, Ben. So, why don't we just kind of get right into things, Ben? Why don't we talk about, early childhood and stuff growing up and how you kind of got into athletics, and then we'll, tie that into strength stuff later on as we go along.
Yeah. So, I grew up down south, real small town, not really known for anything other than athletics. I mean, there have been, several guys from my town who have gone pro in different sports. Really got into athletics at 8 years old. Grew up in a football family, wanted to play football, but the city league, for whatever reason, they came up with the age was 9 that you had to be to play football. So, but I was able to play soccer. So my first actual organized sport that I played was soccer. Played it just because I wanted to be competitive at something, even at an early age. And then as soon as I turned 9, transitioned right into that rec league. And really kind of just, I guess, with the background coming from a football family and my dad working with me, kind of excelled at football at an early age. Played all the way through high school. Also played other sports. I wrestled, played baseball a little bit. But football is kind of always my passion sport and what I enjoy to do besides lifting weights, which my dad also got me into at an early age.
That's good. Yeah, man. Those early childhood things are, really, they still come up. I kind of, as you grow up, I know with me, same thing, playing sports, and all the stuff I learned and things being on team sports really helped kind of, pave the way as being a coach. When you played in the early years, in high school and stuff, did you have any aspirations of coaching? Like, did you take on a leadership role, or was that something that came after?
No, that definitely came later. I was always kind of the quiet guy. Just worked hard, did what I had to do in practice on the fields, but I wasn't the guy giving halftime speeches and doing all that. I kind of just played my role, I guess. And I did really well in sports, but I was never somebody that was extremely gifted in anything. I was just always going to be one of the hardest workers on the field. And so I owe a lot of my success, and not just youth athletics, but everything in life, just to that work ethic that I got from my family growing up.
Yeah. Do you feel like the work ethic and stuff that you used, learned growing up with weights and playing sports, did that transition very well into college when you went on to play there?
So I actually I had the opportunity to play college ball, had some offers from a few schools, but ultimately ended up joining the Army instead. So that's I love football, but I got to a point where I grew up mid 9/11 era, happened when I was in 8th grade. And so that kind of was always in the back of my mind about doing something bigger. So I had an opportunity to play some Division III ball, but ultimately ended up joining the Army instead. But I would say that the leadership, or not the leadership, but the work ethic that I learned playing sports and everything growing up in a small town Southern life definitely led to success I had in the military as well.
Okay. So when you were, going through the military and all that stuff, when did you start coaching? When was the time kind of that you figured out that being a coach is something you wanted to do?
So I guess in an official capacity, I started probably sometime around 2010, I would say. I'd always been, besides football, I had a passion for fitness and the gym and everything like that. And then so this opportunity came around to go to a school called Master Fitness Trainer in the Army. And it's in the early stages, I think 2010 was kind of the first time that they actually like rolled that class out. It was kind of a new thing. The Army was starting to get into human performance and everything on a more strategic level. So essentially, the Master Fitness Trainer course is a very dumbed down version of CSCS. I mean, I learned very, very basic principles of periodization programming, learned how to coach lifts and everything like that, and then took that back to my unit. And so the additional role I had besides my day-to-day job in the Army was now to program our fitness training for the calendar. So I'd have to put together a training calendar for each quarter, submit it to my chain of command for approval, and then it went out. I trained my small platoon, 20 to 30 guys. I was basically in charge of training, and then everybody else kind of filtered out and did their training based off of what I had written up.
Okay. And then from that, how long did you do that for? From 2010 to what time?
So I got off of active duty in 2015, and I did that as an additional duty pretty much through that whole time. The role never got any bigger. It kind of stayed the same, where like I did the programming and submitted it up for approval, and then I only really trained like my small group of guys wherever it was that I ended up being during that 5-year course. But that's kind of what got me into the idea that when I got out that I wanted to do something in the health and fitness arena.
So after you got out in 2015, where was the first place you went to that you kind of started with, coaching and building into the health arena?
Yeah, so 15, I got out, moved to New York City, started school at LIU. I think I met you later, maybe like 2016 or 17, but started school anyway. LIU's program was undergrads, just basic sports science. And actually the very first college course I took out of the Army after registration and everything was Richard's class, functional sports training. So that was the very first college course I took was functional sports training, met the head strength coach at LIU. And that really kind of catapulted that one individual thing is kind of what catapulted and put me to where position where we're even talking right now.
Yeah, no. And it's crazy you say that because the same thing with me, when I got there in 2009, my first class ever was the same class with Richard and all the stuff he taught. For those of you out there, Richard was in my first episode a few weeks ago, and it was the same thing. The way he taught, the way he identified people, and the way he kind of challenged you. But if he knew you knew what you're doing, he kind of let you spread your wings a little bit and get involved. And like I said, man, it's the same story for me. Once you got there, when did you start transitioning into the team stuff? Were you a student for a long time, or did you start right away kind of working with the teams in there?
I didn't start working right away, but Richard, in his infinite wisdom, saw something in me in class. I guess being a little bit older, being a veteran that had a very, very minute amount of coaching experience, he kind of took me under his wing. So it got, within that first couple of weeks of being in class, if I wasn't in class or like his class or any class at all, or at home or in the gym, I was in the dungeon. I wasn't even coaching, wasn't doing anything. I was literally just hanging out and watching him and Iggy do their things. And from there, it kind of started growing into more of a coaching role. He would like let me do the warm-ups, and then I'd sit back and watch again. And then it'd be like, coach, go coach. I don't know. I don't want to throw any names out there. Go coach so-and-so on how to do a squat. Mm-hmm. And I'd like go work with individual people on very small things. And that role just kind of kept slowly growing until it got to the point where I was basically full-time coaching, which is around the time I think I met you.
When you first got there, I was still in the minor leagues. For those who don't know, the dungeon was our wonderful place of learning at the LIU Brooklyn campus. It was a weight room in the basement of the gymnasium, which is no longer there. You'll hear me reference that a lot in the podcast, but that's where me and Brad and a lot of other people I have on the show we learned a lot of stuff there. And same thing with me, I was there with Richard, and the same thing happened. The role got bigger and bigger, and then you start getting comfortable. and then it flourishes from there. For those of you who don't know, Brad is very big into the Olympic lifting circle as well. Why don't we touch a little bit about that before we go on? When did you start with the Olympic lifts? Like, when did you start doing them yourself, or was that something you kind of picked up along the way in the fitness journey, kind of?
Yeah. So I kind of just in the fitness journey started picking it up. It was something I was very interested in. My background, even from an early age, had always just been kind of powerlifting. My dad was a power lifter, so like bench, squat, deadlift, that was always like the center point of what of my training focus was. But then it got to the point I started watching weightlifting and meeting some guys who did it, and I was like, wow, man, it's like a deadlift on steroids. This guy's just picking up 400 pounds, throwing it on his shoulder, standing up with it, and then going overhead. And the idea that it's kind of like there's nothing more apex in lifting weights, or powerlifting, weightlifting, bodybuilding. Like to me, the most apex thing you can do is pick up 400 pounds, squat it, and then put it overhead. So I got very, very interested in it. Had no idea what in the hell I was doing. So I was just on YouTube. I was on social media, following everybody who's anybody, watching their videos. And then ended up hooking up with a guy in New York City who was like a weightlifting specialist, competes in all the USAW meets and everything, and started working with him and got certified. And now I'm actually coaching myself.
Oh, great. How was the transition from training kind of your platoon into the college athlete? What was the differences, and what were some of the challenges you would say that you ran into with that?
Probably the biggest thing would be mentality. So, going from being, what was I, 26, 27, getting out of the Army, been on multiple combat tours at that time. The way that you talk to 20-year-old guys on a daily setting when you're lifting weights and everything is completely different than how you're going to talk to 18, 19, 20-year-old girls on a lacrosse team, which was the first team that I was given. So I really, really had to adapt, really, I would say my language more than anything, trying to navigate, keeping the discipline that I wanted to have with coaching an entity or a group of people, but not losing my job by saying the wrong thing.
Yeah,
So
no,
that was probably the biggest struggle I had, was like transitioning the audience in which I was coaching.
Yeah, no, that's always a big thing, for everybody that kind of wants to get out there and thinks that, one coach can coach everything. That's the biggest thing, especially when you're in the field, when you transition from different groups, different teams or different age groups. I think it's, you got to kind of find the way in which to coach them the best. So we're in 15. We started with lacrosse. Why don't we take it from there? What happened next?
I pretty much for the most part, Richard gave me full autonomy of training the women's lacrosse team. When I basically got them at this point now, I think I'm starting to enter grad school. I'd gotten back from my internship at South Carolina. And Richard was like, I trust you. You've been in my classes. You've done coaching on a Division I level. Now at this point, here's your team, run with it. And the way I approached that very first assignment, I guess, was to go and watch them practice. So I went and watched them practice. Got the numbers, talked to the athletic trainers, got the numbers on like what their historical injury profile looks like. And then built that into my first kind of program and really attacked it and had really great success. Working with Richard, kind of still, I guess, molding how I was putting movements together in that ABC format that I think most coaches use now, but where to put the different movements at. And I took a team that historically had 2 to 3 season-ending hamstring or ACL injuries every season for the 6 seasons prior to me taking them over, to the 2.5 years that I had, and they had 0. And that was, I owe that purely to great mentorship from Richard, and then just kind of paying attention to movement patterns, how they move, and what I thought attributed to their pattern of season-ending injuries. And that was weak hamstrings. So I threw a lot of Nordic hamstring curls in there. I threw a lot of RDLs, a lot of that kind of stuff. And then for those years that I was over them before I moved on, didn't have any of those season-ending injuries.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and especially since, when you run into a team like that with a lot of injuries, you kind of have to dissect, everything that they're doing, the practice, how much they eat, how much rest they get, and really hammering on that stuff. And usually it's the little things like you talked about with the Nordic and just getting them to be stable, is what kind of turns everything around. What were some of the challenges that you feel that you ran into when you introduced the new program to a lacrosse team that pretty much didn't really do too much of that stuff at the time?
So this was going to be one of those situations where it's going to sound like I'm lying because I feel like I was extremely lucky with the group of girls that I got. The seniors, the juniors and seniors that were on the group were kind of to a point where they were tired of being hurt all the time, for whatever reasons, being hurt on the field or in the weight room. So when I came in with a new program, new ideas, and a fresh face, and explained to them, because I had to sit down. Like we brought the team in. The first session wasn't even a session. We just like sat down and talked. And I think that also led to my success with them was how I approached them. I didn't just come in guns a blazing. And so with those upperclassmen being kind of over everything that happened in the past, it kind of almost created that instant buy-in that coaches dream of. And the freshmen and the sophomores, they just kind of followed suit because, okay, if this is what our upperclassmen are doing, this is what we're going to do. So we kind of almost went through it like an instant culture change. And I was just really lucky. I didn't really have to fight for it that much.
Yeah, no, it's always good. I think it's once you get the seniors and the juniors to kind of buy in, your freshmen, your sophomores usually will, come in too. And then once you get everybody kind of working towards the same goal, I think that's where you have an easy time. When I was with baseball, same thing. Everybody bought in, and everything ran like a top, and it was fantastic. Let's go into the mental side a little bit. When you coached, the girls, what were some of the things you used in terms to make sure that they were kind of mentally in the zone when you were in there? They were on a team where they kind of struggle with some stuff a lot. How did you kind of change the mental culture, if you will, of them going into the weight room every day and putting the work in?
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest struggles I had with them. Typically, I would say that I prefer working with female sports teams more than male sports teams, just because you don't end up having that alpha male mentality that you have to deal with alongside with coaching. In my experience, female athletes are kind of tend to just come in and do the work and work hard. The energy may not always be as high as, like, say, a Division I football team, but you don't get that diva mentality that D1 football players can give you at times. But as far as the mental aspect of that's where it kind of gets a little bit harder, dealing with that psyche and all the issues that go along with being an athlete. I mean, one of the biggest things I'm sure dealing with female athletes is body image issues. Like, they don't want their legs to get too big, so they don't want to squat heavy. So kind of working through those things and like dealing with, okay, I've got to make you a better athlete. I've got to put some muscle on you. But I also, in the back of my mind, know that I have to deal with the images and like how you're going to see yourself in the mirror, because that's going to go way farther down the road than you playing lacrosse in college for 4 years. So the biggest part of that was taking the time to build individual relationships with as many of them as I could. Having the team relationship, but then having those individual relationships and like knowing about their life, where they came from, what their favorite foods are, which girls they hang out with, what they like to do for fun, and being able to use that and just being able to say, hey, all right, I understand this is what you want to look like when you're done with lacrosse. What would you say if I tell you that I can get you to squat what I want you to squat, but your legs aren't really going to get bigger? And they're like, well, how is that possible? Because muscle, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, what we can do is change the style of how we're getting you to squat, where we're only training your nervous system to make the muscle that you have more efficient without putting any more on. And they're like, they sit back and question it, and they're like, so I can get stronger but not look like a man? I'm like, absolutely. And then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's part of coaching. You just gotta kind of see what works.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge thing. You have to learn everybody you have. You have 30 guys, you have 100. You have to understand what everybody wants, because even though you come in with a goal and you think everybody wants to win or everybody wants to really lay it on the line in the weight room or whatever, some people don't want to do that, or some people have a different kind of idea of how that's done. And, it's very important, especially when you're coaching. I think you hit it right on the head there, to understand each individual and what they want and what they're going for, what they want after, and what their immediate goals are, short term and long term. So
Hmm.
let's go into what happened after LIU. So what happened after you left LIU on the journey?
So LIU, I think at this point it's probably public knowledge. Richard left for his reasons, to start a program out at Poly Prep Country Day School, which is for those not in the area, is a very, very prominent private school. The who's who of New York City's kids go there. It's a big money high school and it's a big athletic program. I mean, kids from sports, from women's volleyball to football, go D1 every year. But they didn't have sports performance. And so the relationship and the name that he'd built for himself kind of fostered starting a program. And then he left, and I was like, well, wait, I like working for you. I'm going with you. And went on out there, and it was very, very small. It was a semester by semester. They're like, well, if we can afford to give you money next semester, you can come back. If not, good luck, I guess, basically. And much, much nicer. I really enjoyed my time out there, and loved everybody I worked with. But that's kind of the deal, because it was a new program. It was just himself and one full-time assistant. So I was just there because I enjoyed working for him, and knowing that I was still young in my career, I was willing to work for next to nothing.
That's good. Yeah, over at Poly's a solid place. They got a lot of stuff. Sorinex actually is.
Yeah.
They put their weight room in. Everything is beautiful over there. But yeah, no, he's been doing a great job over there building that program up and really starting to grow. And the kids that come out of there are really starting to make some names. So after you left Poly Prep, where did you go after you exited Poly Prep?
So kind of during my time at Poly Prep, because it was such a limited role, I wasn't there on a full-time basis. I pretty much came just in the afternoons to work with kids once they got out. I worked with baseball and basketball programs there. I took on, or didn't take on, I just was like looking and looking and looking. And I started working with a private strength and conditioning company in the city called J2 Fit, Journey 2 Fit, J2 for short. And so basically with that, it's a company, a guy named Mike Dewar started, and we worked with athletes, and we worked with some high profile people that, athletes in their off season, college athletes that were home for the summer, stuff like that. But also trained with air quote general pop. But one thing I'll say a difference in like our general pop was versus like a box gym, like these were still people that, like, while they might not be a professional or a collegiate athlete, like they got after it. So it's really rewarding to work with, to still kind of work in that arena of training people like athletes, even though there might be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. So I was kind of doing both of those. The J2 Fit was kind of became my full-time gig. I was probably doing 30 to 40 hours a week doing that, individual 1 hour private sessions, on top of working out at Poly Prep in the afternoon. And that's kind of how I actually ended up leading into working at NYU. The guy who owned J2 Fit was also a part-time assistant at NYU at the time. So when I worked there for, I want to say like 9 or 10 months, something like that. And in that time, built a relationship with him, obviously, and started building a relationship with people at NYU. So when he moved and took his company to Ohio, basically he was like, okay, he'd already given fair warning to NYU that he was leaving, and said, hey, if you want to make the hiring process really easy, I've got this guy. He can step right in and just start coaching. And so he had a relationship there that the head coach was like, sure, that sounds great. I don't want to have to deal with hiring. If you've got a guy, I trust your word. And so like that was another aspect of my life, of my career, that's been super, super lucky, and being kind of in the right place at the right time. And another key player that puts me where I am now. So now we're at 2 key players that without them, I'm not where I am. And in our 3rd key player, the head strength coach, in my short, probably 6 months there, she got an offer to go to Dartmouth to be the number 2 on the football program, being one of a handful of female coaches in a Division I football program in the country. And so obviously she couldn't turn that down. And with her leaving, I'd already, I guess, impressed the athletic staff enough that they were like, we feel like you got enough time in coaching. You got almost a decade of experience with all of and we've seen how you work. We've seen how the kids adapt to you and like kind of accept you in. Would you be interested in the head coach role? And I was like, sign me up, coach. I was like, I'm ready. So I've had definitely a non-traditional rise in the strength and conditioning game. And I can only attribute that to luck and having the right people on my side at the right time. And just like the stars lining up. So where I am is not, nobody should look at what I've done and be like, oh, I can do that, because it's not the typical case.
Yeah, no, we've, sometimes the road is all over the place, but as you said, pivotal people. And for those out there listening, as you go through the journey, whether it may be with strength conditioning or anything, it's pretty much all about the people, especially in strength conditioning. It's all about who you network with, and pretty much, you never know who's going to watch you and where you're going to meet somebody, and when they're judging you or when they're trying to kind of feel you out. So you always kind of want to be on your A game whenever you're training, whenever you're in the gym, whenever you go to, a conference, or, you're just at a sporting event, because you'll never know where the opportunities will come. Same thing happened for me. Mine's non-traditional, but, I was in the minor leagues, but that's the same thing, all about people helping me out from, meeting them in one place or another. What would you say, your time at LIU, as a volunteer and going through that, what are some of the things you feel like are most important in now as your head role at NYU? Like, things you learned or things that kind of resonate with you from your time as a volunteer?
Relationship building. I'm going to be, that's going to be my fallback. I think pretty much forever. And it also is lucky that I came into the field at a very pivotal time where it's not all about that yelling hype coach anymore that just writes the program. It's really about building relationships, like Brett Bartholomew, The Art of Coaching, and The Art of Buy-In. And so coming into the field at a time where you can't just get by on being that coach that yells the whole time and plays loud music, you got to actually build relationships, I think has also attributed to the small success that I've had. And carrying that right over to NYU. I mean, just talking with people, finding out, where people are from, what they like to do, stuff like that. It has really, I've seen the change since I've been there, that athletes want to be in the gym more. And the more athletes want to be in the gym, the more successful I'm going to be. So, and Brett Bartholomew said this too. At the end of the day, the science that we as strength coaches know, by and large, has not changed. What is changing is the relationships that we're going to build with athletes. And that's going to be the key component, I think, for the success, not only of the field, but for individual coaches.
Yeah. And, to quote Richard, I remember, same class you talked about, 2009, he said, you can present your stuff on a paper plate or a platter. It's all about how you present the stuff, and it's all about the relationships, and like you said, we're all kind of reaching into the same bag of tricks when it comes to the exercises, and the strength stuff. That stuff has really not changed. You see it all the time. You see guys on Instagram, that light themselves on fire and, do deadlifts on roller skates, and that's fantastic. But for the most part, when you go through this and when you're at a school, we all use the same thing. We all use the same movements, and we all pretty much have the same goal. But I think that relationship building and making the kids want to come in the gym and also trust you. Trust, I think, is the biggest thing. Once they trust you, they'll run through a wall for you. But if they don't trust you, you can have a program that's, everybody stands by and offers great results. But if they don't trust you, they're not going to really buy in, and you're not going to get anything out of them.
That goes back to the saying, and this is so true. I've heard many people say it. I don't know who to attribute first saying it to, but athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yep, of course.
And then my former, my boss and colleague and friend, Kaylee Fournier, anybody can be a strength and conditioning coach, but only a select few are going to be great strength and conditioning coaches. So anybody can go online and look at squats and bench and deadlift and 5x5 and percentages and put it on paper and probably get some people stronger. But the successful coaches, the coaches that everybody wants, the coaches that get reached out to for jobs that don't reach out to for jobs are the ones that are working more on that mental side and that building relationships.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point. I use the same thing. The relationships is the biggest thing. You want to be able to call any of the athletes that work with you and say, yep, that's the guy. He did this for me. He did this for me. During the quarantine, I've been talking to a lot of former athletes and former people, and it's just amazing to me. And it's very heartwarming that, I've changed their life, or I changed a lot of things, different aspects just from being their strength coach, for a year, and now they work for businesses and finance and things like that. And you really kind of realize how big of an impact you actually have and can have on somebody else, regardless of the weights and the deadlifts. So for anybody that wants to get involved in the field, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice? If you could kind of give them, 3 cornerstone things to really do if they're just starting out.
Whew. 3 pieces, only 3?
If you got, maybe 5, we'll go 5.
Do you have a couple of hours?
Yeah. Episode 2.
Let's see. Definitely for sure networking. Put your name out there, introduce yourself to as many people as possible. This is a very small field. As you're listening to Joe's podcast, all 3 of his guests know each other in some capacity or of working in the field. So network, get your name out there. Next, I would say be humble. Arrogance is only going to get you so far. Arrogance will get you to a certain point. Some people like that. They like somebody that's just like, go get it all the time and like, I'm better than you. But it's only going to get you so far. I think being humble is going to take you a lot farther in life, knowing that you don't have all the answers, and not being afraid to not know all the answers. That's been a huge thing for me. Is like, I'm always learning. I'm always on social media. If I see something, I like save it to my save tabs. I'm reaching out to coaches. Hey, I saw you do this. Can you tell me why? And I never approach anything like that from a point of not why because I don't agree with it. I honestly just want to know why because I haven't seen it before. If you can explain the science behind it and provide something, it could be something that I add to my toolbox. So being open to learning, being humble, that kind of all wrapped in together. And then the last one, I would say, be willing to work for free. It's an unfortunate truth, but it is a thing within this field that you've got to go through the internships, you've got to go through the grad assistantships, being a student worker. Those are the kind of things you have to start off with. You may get extremely lucky like Joe and I, and your rise happens a lot faster, or you might have to intern for a couple of years before you get that first paying gig. It's not an easy field. It's a field. I've said this before. I actually posted about it recently. If you get in it for the money, you're here for the wrong reasons. Because unless you just automatically get to a Power 5 football program, you're not going to make a shit ton of money in this field. You've got to really do it because you have a passion for coaching, and that's going to take you a lot farther, along with being humble, than just trying to make money in the field.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. This isn't if you're going to go after money, you might want to try something else. But I think, the networking is number one, and also be humble. But I think the things that Brad talked about, all 3 of them kind of encompass you, because if you go in there with a humbling spirit and you go in there with the right reasons to want to help, the athletes, and change your lives, they will actually change your life if you get close enough. That networking, also, those people become your brothers, because those are the people you reach out to, and, encompassing that together, they help you get through those tough times, you know, the volunteer time, the working for free, because when you're there grinding with another assistant or somebody else, those people become your brothers because they're going through the same struggles. So all those people kind of involved in that journey, when you finally get to where you want to go or where you're supposed to go, if you will, you know, you always have those people to lean on, but that ability to stay humble during those rough times kind of keeps you even keel, and you always remember, you know, why you're doing those things.
Oh, yeah. I'll
So
add on to that too, even just real quick. Like the guys that I interned with when I was at South Carolina with the football team, and Jeff Dillman, who was the strength coach then at the time, was a wonderful mentor. I'm still in contact with him today. You know, you never know who down the road is going to have a job offer that you can get. So the guys that I interned with, several of us are now in colleges, be it the head coach or assistant coach on big football programs. And we interned together and we struggled. So now when a job opens up, somebody's going, oh, I interned with Brad. He was awesome early. Enjoy working with him. He's the head strength coach over here now. He'd be great for this Division I football gig, which I'm hoping has happened. So if anybody's listening that I interned with who has a football gig, I'm your guy. So yeah, I mean, they all do kind of tie in together, that being humble, working for free, and being a sponge ready to soak up knowledge. They do kind of all tie in together.
yeah, no, I'll touch right on that point. I got the same humbling story. When I was my first personal training job, actually, I went to Queens College for about a half hour, and then they asked me to leave, but that's a story for another time. But I was in a personal training gym. We were in an office that had a boiler in it. It was a boiler room, so it had the hot water tank, and it was me and two other strength coaches. One of them is now the head across the street at St. Francis from LIU, and the other one is the head at Delaware State. And then, of course, I was in the minor league. So, you know, those humble beginnings, man, it's always crazy to look back and say, wow, look where these people are now. You know, we came up with all these people. I mean, we can talk about this for hours about all the people we were at LIU with, you know. And
I mean, every coach in New York City is attached to us in some way. I mean, you've got Craig Noto at Wagner. You've got you got me, you got Richard. I mean, there's all these coaches that it's a very small network.
Yeah, no, and again, touching on the network. So what's next for you at NYU? What is your, you know, minus what's going on now, but what's the goal in kind of changing things there? And what are some of the kind of, you know, shorter term goals and then eventually the long-term goals you have to be as the head there at NYU?
Yeah, so short-term goals, I think probably along with any coach in any school, anywhere, no matter how long they've been there, is getting through this next 6 months. So, I mean, we've got a plan in place, probably very similar to most other places. Get in the gym safely. Obviously, the biggest thing that I'm focused on is my athlete's health. I could care less who squats 500 pounds. I could care less who deadlifts, runs the fastest 40. I want to get them back in, get them healthy, keep them healthy. That way, you know, hopefully in the spring, everything kind of can get back to normal. And now I've got athletes that are ready to go. So that's definitely my short-term goal, is just getting my athletes back, keeping them healthy through the winter time, and hopefully getting into some kind of spring competition season. Long-term or medium-term, we're building a new gym at NYU, completely new state-of-the-art human performance facility. It's going to be completely outfitted by Sorinex. So we're doing that. That's a project I'm working on right now, is, you know, layout and figuring out what pieces of equipment I want, stuff like that. And then just kind of building what I know NYU can be. I mean, the last couple of years, and even the last year, and this is not necessarily a reflection on me, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but we have been in 6 sports of our 15 sports, have been in some kind of NCAA tournament, national championship tournament, in the last year. So I just want to keep building on that. I want to go from taking, what was it in total, 36 athletes to national championship tournaments to half of them. So that's my goal, is just keep building. I know there's a lot more potential at NYU than what people know. I mean, there are still people out there that I'm sure never knew NYU had athletics programs. Because I get DMs every day. I'm like, wait, NYU has athletics? I didn't know that. So just building that name, building that brand is my next kind of intermediate goal. And then ultimately, I'd like to see myself in a Power 5 football program. kind of making the jump from Olympic sports back into football, because as we started off the episode, that's always been my passion. I love football, and that's kind of I love the energy, and it's obviously not a knock on Olympic sports. I love what I do, but football is kind of where I see myself kind of carrying out my career.
Yeah, man, no, that's, we always want to see the athletes, succeed, and we want everybody to be successful that we coach. And we want to leave kind of a legacy, if you will, everywhere you go. And I mean, I walk past where that new facility is going to be on the way to work when it was being built. And it's an amazing property, and it's going to be gigantic. And like I said, the stuff you're doing over there is great, man. And where can anybody reach you who has questions or, just wants to talk to you?
Yeah, so either NYU or my personal NYU Instagram is just NYU_strength. I've set up the email tab there, which will go straight to my NYU email. My personal page is _Brad _Godbold _. And also the email tab there will send you right to my personal email. So you can DM me, you can email me. I think my personal has also a text option, so you can text me. Just reach out. You want to chop it up, you have questions, whatever it is, you can reach out. I want to be that guy who's an available resource no matter what. I feel like that's the only way we drive the industry forward.
Yeah, of course. No, always want to be open. Same thing with me. Anybody has questions or anything, leave a comment, hit up the Instagram, and always be happy to chat. Don't forget the podcast either. Brad has his own.
Yeah.
Why don't you shout that out too?
Yeah, so I have my own baby podcast. It's called The Grown and Grizzly Experience. It's available on, everything: Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, all the podcast stations. Kind of the same deal. I like talking to people. Mine delves more into the mental health space and how a background in health and fitness and sports and athletics can really provide you a solid platform to attack the struggles and mental health that you might deal with on a daily basis, or when that bout of depression hits. I know in my experience, and a lot of people I've had on my podcast, having the lessons that you learn in sport and in the gym and in the fitness community really help a lot more to deal with those issues than, say, if you've never had to struggle through a 1-rep back squat, then you don't have that mentality to fall back on when something happens in your life that you can't control. So it kind of really delves more into that mental health aspect of health and fitness.
Yeah, no, it's a great podcast. I've listened to it. And like I said, check that out if you have a chance to hear Brad, and, great work over there. Well, I think that's it, man. I want to thank you for coming on, man. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Maybe hopefully we can do this again. I think we could have talked for a little while, but man, it was great, man. And just thank you, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you having me on, man.
All right. Thanks.